Hey there, everyone. Thank you so much for checking out my hair groom asset. This is going to be a video going over how to use it, what the concept is behind it, and what you can expect when you purchase it. So this first scene here is our example scene. So I have two characters, example characters. We got a little Einstein, little punk character, and they share some similar traits. First is, of course, just that we can see the mesh here. These little subdivided chunks of mesh that we have our curves on. Now, generally how I structure the curves themselves is I have in the, so the mustache, so we have mustache and the hair are two separate objects. But basically we create a collection, and in that collection we create the meshes. Once we have the mesh that we like, we can create a curve. It doesn't matter that if it doesn't have to be for each of them. We just need the one curve object, which we then extract into a separate collection because we can't reference the collection it's in. And this is where my modifier exists. So this is the Mesh Hair Groom geometry nodes modifier. You can see we have a collection that we're targeting. That's the same one right here that contains all the hair, not the mustache, but all the hair here. And it extracts two vertex groups, the root and tip. I'll get into more of the technical side of that in a little bit. This is just going to be an overview for this file. And we have a strand amount, which we can always turn up. I do find it's best to rely more on the geometry, the underlying geometry for the amount of strands, because this can get like a subdivision modifier. This can kind of get out of hand quickly if you turn it up too many times. And then also we have volume strands for interior strands. We have a strand radius for thickness. It is important to note that right now we are visualizing the curves if you go into render settings, in the curves here, this is how we are visualizing the curves. If you set it to strand, they're basically infinitely thin strands, and strips is the best way to visualize it. If you do not have strip enabled, you will not be able to get thickness on your curves unless you turn them into geometry with your own modifier. All right. So yeah, again, the general concept is, of course, make a mesh, get the curve, and then get the mesh, make the mesh, and then apply the curves from it. Create the curves from it. That's the word I'm looking for. And we can see the same here. We've got our big fan of geometry right here that is then creating these curves. Now there's a few really cool things about using mesh instead of a hair groom system, the standard Blender hair groom system. And that a lot of that comes down to the fact that we can inject vertex groups and attributes directly into the mesh. So for example, right here we have UV position. So we're extracting the UVs from the mesh. And if I go to the UV editor here, you can see this is our UV position here. And with that, we can then actually use an image. So this red and black texture here is an image texture. It's just a little mess, more of a test than anything. But you can see that if I go into paint mode and we start moving this around, these updates are actually applying in real time because we are sampling the UV position directly. As well, you have color. I'm not going to switch it right now. There is a bug in geometry nodes, just in Blender in general. If you swap attributes and then enter render mode, it's going to crash once. So switch it, save, then display it because it's going to crash once. I don't know why that is, but just a little Blender hiccup. Additionally, we have a lot of the standard hair attributes that you would see. Random strand color. We have colors for, actually this one's just another Vertex Colors, but then factor is another standard one. And you can also get length out of it, pretty much anything you would expect from hair. And now there's a few other cool features, again, because we're using geometry. So I have created another geometry nodes modifier, and this one is not on the hair strands, it is on the geometry. But when we click it, we can actually set up our hair strands. I'm going to enter orthographic view. And you can see that this allows for very quick hair card baking. This might not be the most ideal setup because everything's kind of close together, but I think it illustrates the concept rather well. These ones do not have the split edges. We'll get into that in a little bit when I get into making my own. But there's some cool things we can do here. So now I'm going to select the hair curves, and we're going to add the last and third modifier that geometry nodes modifier I've created, which is the cleaner, which is not in here. Okay, well, I'm going to have to edit that out. Bum, bum, bum. That would be in UV cleaner. Where'd that go? We also have the simple start. I believe it is in here too. Yeah, UV cleaner. Okay, there we go. So UV island cleaner. All right, so I had the node in a different file there. But once we have set up our hair grooms, we can add this additional node, which is also on the curves, but it's at the bottom of our stack. So we have our initial hair groom creator, and then we can add on duplicate hair curves or any other asset from hair curves in here. So not all of them are going to play as nicely with this kind of setup. The roll hair curves, that one's a little rough. Rotate curves, because they're going to kind of roll out to the side or something. They might come out like this direction, and that's not going to work well. So I would recommend, if you do want rolls or rotations and things like that, that you actually just model that instead of relying on the hair curves for those kinds of effects. Because one of the big benefits is we are actually using box modeling for this. So unlike hair grooms, we can include things like tilt, normal direction, just by modeling it ourselves. But once we have our duplicates and things like that, or frizz is also one that I add quite often, we can add this cleaner at the very bottom. We do need to reference the same collection that our initial one is referencing. So I'm just going to pop that in there. There we go. And this allows us some really cool things. So the first thing is that for any manifold mesh, anything that's kind of a closed box, it is actually taking the, it's making it seamless by copying to the sides the main island. So it should avoid a lot of issues with baking and seams not being seamless. Then we also have, ooh, it's quite laggy, this margins option. So you should be able to go in and cut away anything around this. I think it's just very dense right now because of my subdivision modifier on the geometry. But this way you can go in and clean up the edges, make sure that things aren't touching or overlapping. That'll be very important for other objects. So that's kind of the general setup. And I'm going to go ahead and we'll hop into another file. I'll show it to you right now. Let's turn this off and take the hair here. Oh, right, because it's referencing the collection. Turn this one off. I do have a UV position toggle. That way you be a little bit more exact, because sometimes it's easy to forget that it's on in render mode. So I just added a toggle as well. Okay, so that looks good. Let's go to the simple start scene now. All right, so this is kind of just the one I would recommend for any of your personal projects, the ones that you're going to be making for yourself. I made a very minimal, just the essentials here set up, so you can just get in, get started, get moving. So all that's really in the scene is our camera for baking. the geometry, one strip of hair strand, which we can set the UV position for. And then the bake camera, obviously, is set up to bake it. And then the curves that are on the geometry. Now, for our object here, for the actual geometry itself, what is going on under the hood is we have 3 vertex groups. First is the root. I'm going to go into weight paint. So we have our root right here, which just determines where it physically attaches, just like a hair root. And then the tip, so we can create even strands that go all the way to this other group. That is the main purpose of also targeting the tip. If you're making your mesh from scratch rather than using this default one, just make sure you have a cut in the middle so it does cleanly separate the root and the tip. Additionally, we have this pin group because everything, one of the main benefits, another main benefit of working with mesh is that we can add cloth sims. So it's a little laggy in the viewport. We can move it around. It's laggy because I'm grabbing the mesh directly. We'll put that back. All right. Okay, I'm going to cut here and then we'll bring in a guy to start working on the haircut. All right, welcome back. So I've cleared out the geometry and the curves in the scene, and I've brought in a reference image and an example kind of character. We're going to make the hair from scratch just so I have that saved. So first thing we're going to do is make a plane. And I'm going to move this up. I'm going to shrink it in on the sides and make some cuts. So I usually like 3, just because I always like having a cut right in the middle. And now we're going to make some vertex groups. I'm going to make a root, assign that. Then I'm going to make tip, assign, and lastly, pin. Pin's not necessarily required, because if you're not using cloth physics, then it's not necessary. But I do like to have it. And we'll do something like that. Okay. All right. And I won't add physics for right now. Then, with our hair geometry, I'm going to I already have this collection set up, but normally I'd make 2 collections. Actually, might as well just do it. New collection. So we'll call this hair, and I'll drop in my hair geometry. Then I'll make another new collection, which I'll call hair geo. And again, drop that in there. With my hair geometry selected, I will make a curve, empty hair, and this automatically gets assigned as a child object to the geometry I had selected. I'm going to drag it out into the top hair, and that way I can put all my geometry in this folder. I have my curve, my hair curves, very easily accessible, and we can reference the collection with the geometry. Then I'm going to go to modifiers, get rid of the default one, add in our Mesh Hair Groom, and assign the collection, like so. And immediately we get some strands. If you'd like, you could take your geometry, go to viewport display, and set it to wire, just so it's a little bit easier to see. I'm going to keep that off for right now. Just keep it at textured. Okay. I'm going to duplicate this. Boom. So now I have a second hair, and we're going to start actually modeling. So I think we're going to start with the bangs, because that should be pretty straightforward. We're just going to take the tip here. I'm switching my proportional editing to sharp. I'm going to rotate it so we get a nice curve. Probably right about there. And then just stick it on. It should be smaller. Something like that. It's not gonna quite look like our reference because the head's so different. Okay. Then I'm going to add a mirror modifier. We'll take this left curve, put it at 0. So now we can see this other chunk is getting mirrored. And then from the top view, I can just move this. Oh, let me turn off proportional editing. Move this over here. Do a little cut. Now we've got something like bangs. We kind of squish this down. Yeah, we're just kind of feeling it out a little bit. I won't get into like full detail because there's always more cleanup to do on this kind of stuff, but this will be a very good start. We'll do a subdivision surface. Shade it smooth. And again, if I hide the geometry, we can see our hair strands. Now, this may look kind of weird if you're not familiar with working with hair grooms, but really on the the bottom level of a hair groom, we don't really want it to be that complicated. We want it to be something that we can understand where things are going, and then we can use our assets here to layer on additional detail. So for example, with the duplicate hair curves, if I add that on, we can start immediately getting more strands, but now we know where they're going to be. We have control over where exactly they're being positioned. But I will turn that off right now. Okay, so that's that one. Let's look a little bit closer at our hair. So I think that for the hair, we have this big old bun in the back. And so what we're going to try to do is we're going to have the root on this side and the tip here. So all the hair flows this way, up top like a big donut. Just a big donut. And we could actually probably just continue that all the way out here. Maybe I'll separate it when it's where it's wrapped up, but something like that. Okay. So back to here. You know what? I will just duplicate this one again. And again, the reason the hair gets applied immediately is because all these duplicates I'm making are in the hair collection. So it makes it really easy. It's like, oh, if I wanted to put a different hair effect on it, I could pull it out, make a new collection, make a new curve, and do something different on this collection. Or additionally, if I had a different type of hair curve, like if I wanted really simple wispy strands instead of these larger chunks we're making, you could go in and still reference that collection, but do something different with the curves. That way you kind of pull the detail out, make it modular. Okay, so for this chunk, let's do basically the same thing. You know what, actually, instead of doing that, I'm just going to extrude it back and then cut it and extrude it out to the sides. And this is kind of close. Let's actually dissolve these ones so I have a little bit more to work with. But we can do something like this, or it's a little bit easier to work with, I should say. Shrink it, move that in, cut it, grow it. All right, we're getting somewhere. I can delete this edge if I wanted to, so we could see the little hole. Same with the inside here. Just feels a little bit more understandable that way. And then we can shrink it in. And just like the other one, I will also add a subdivision. Okay. Bam. Select the loop. Yeah, might as well make the ponytail. Kind of reminds me of a Despicable Me. Funny. Okay. Scooch it back a little, make it a bit bigger. Some volume. And I'm going to, with the collection, I'm just going to disable it so I can see the strands themselves. If I wanted some additional strands on the inside, there is the volume option here. But I could also just rely on, again, standard modeling workflows with the solidify. So just by throwing that in there, I can make some additional strands. But of course, we just have to be wary of it clipping through. But it's a nice way to just get another layer of detail in there, if I need it. Perhaps you don't. but just wanted to show off the power. Okay. I mean, that's pretty much it for the most part for the base shapes. Now, obviously this doesn't look quite the same. Again, if we slap on the duplicates, so I've got one on here already. We could start adjusting the radius, make it a bit bigger to fill things in. Let me turn off this so we can see it. Yeah, something like that. Radius, turn up the strand amount. Now in the reference, there's a little bit more like side bangs here. So I'm going to go back to turn the geometry back on. This time turn the hair cards visibility off. Curds, be a very different theme. I'm going to duplicate this strand. Wow, I'm tired. And now we can make a little bang off the side pretty easily. Wow, that's intense. That's some intense stuff. There's actually too much here, right? Like that's just too much. That's a really high amount. So what we're going to do is take another look at one of the other huge advantages of working with a mesh, which is the fact that we have vertex groups. So I'm going to put this in here and I'm going to call this duplicate amount. Just a little abbreviation there. We're going to go into weight paint. I'll set everything to 1 because I want maximum value for everything else. Should actually copy this vertex group to the other ones too. So let me hide the curves. This one, whatever. I can just copy the name. There we go. Weight paint. Set that to 1. And then back to here on this guy. I want to select the bang because there's too much duplicates. We can actually just turn that down to 0.1 and assign that value of 0.1. So if I'm back in the weight mode, we can see maximum value, lessened value. Okay, then back to hair curves. I can select the curves, go into amount right here, hit attribute and paste in duplicate amount. Oh, that was a little stronger than I expected. Interesting. Oh, because I have to multiply it times the strand amount. Times 30? Does that works? No, I'll have to figure that out. Okay, maybe that was not quite working how I'd want it to. But I could put it in here a little bit easier. Yeah, that's better. We'll go with that for now. All right. And then, oh, right. The hair is ending here because I extruded out instead of moving out because the tip vertex group is where it's going to end. So instead of extruding, I need to move this out and then just do loop cuts. You could always just reassign the vertex group if you wanted to. No wrong way to do that. Oh, again, I extruded. Old habits. Come back and I see an onion. Oh, sorry, I have chat open for anyone listening to the tutorial later. There we go. Got a little hair geometry. All right, I am going to turn the duplicate amount way down because I now am going to slap on some more subdivisions on here. And again, I would always recommend relying on the strand amount based on the actual geometry. Now you are noticing now that it looks weird. This looks really weird. That's because we need to set our curves to strip like this. And then we can turn up the subdivision amount. We can also go into our geometry nodes curve strand radius, make that thicker or as thick or thin as we want. Did I do this backwards? I did. Well, I'm glad you guys can see the problems you're going to encounter, because I'm setting myself up for them too. All right, this should be root. This should be tip. And I assigned it at 0.1. That should have worked. Root. Tip. There we go. All right. Good. Good stuff. So now that we have kind of like the basic shapes made, you know, we'd want more. Again, if we want to make it look like this hair, right? So with this big chunk of mesh that we have, we can actually just go in, start adding more loop cuts for more definition, and then also separating them with V. So I'm just hitting V there to cut and rip the edge out. And this gives us the ability to kind of go in and start pulling pieces down, moving them out, and just giving it that general, the look we actually are looking for, that we want. Now you don't want to kind of have a split here. So on these edges right here, they are connected, but then this split occurs at this point right here. You want to avoid those. It will not work quite properly. So I'm just going to hit merge, turn the merge off, and that way they're just separate islands. Okay. Now we just keep going. Keep adding a little more detail, you know. Something like this. And we can really start to pull this apart, make the shapes we want. Bam. And for the duplicate, I'm going to turn down the radius so there's less protrusion. It's following the geometry a bit better. Okay. Nice, we're getting somewhere. I think you all can see the how this is working now. And I can just continue. Click, I'm clicking. I am clicking. And this one here, we don't see any duplicates on because, again, I used the vertex group to kind of lessen it. You could also do the same with the strand amount. I'm going to make this kind of thicker curve there. Somewhere down here. Little wispy strands. Elegance. Beauty. I'm pretty sure this image is AI generated. It does not. She looks a little too soft and the eyes kind of weird. That's my guess. Okay. Maybe a little bit more bun on the bottom there. Pull that down. For the ponytail. Ooh, a lot of nice curves there. Very beautiful. I think I will rip this point here. So I'm going to rip that. What that means for this chunk, and I just separate it as well, is that we do need to make this now the root sign. And then on this one, make the tip here I already gave it away, the tip. And we can just continue. And again, I think for many people that are experienced with modeling in Blender, you really can just think about it exactly like that. Like that we are just modeling. And it's great. This is what working with hair grooms should feel like, in my opinion. Because I do not like being a barber. We learn all those skills to make 3D models, and then we throw it out the window to become a barber. Not that there's anything wrong with hairstylists, just that we're not playing to our strengths as creators there. Okay. Now for the hair, we can see all these individual strands. So generally my workflow is make big shape and then cut big shape. Like that's usually my game plan for this kind of stuff. So if we look at the braid here again, or the ponytail, we can just rip it, start doing some cuts here. Turn on symmetry so we can kind of pull these apart. Should probably turn on the mirror mod actually. Anyway, I'll probably stop the tutorial here in just a moment because I think I went over the majority of kinds of things you can expect to make, how to make them, and then it just kind of comes down to taking the time to make the model how you want. I think the last thing I'll touch on are like these little wispy detail strands. Again, you could just, if I can click on the geometry, you just take a little chunk, let's say this edge here, duplicate that out, give it a little cut. I'm going to remove it, tip, remove root, and then reassign root and tip. We should have strand here. Like that. And if you wanted to have more control over making this one look differently, again, you can use the vertex groups, or I could make a new hair geo for hair geo wisps, something like that. Wisps. And then we can move this section. I can click it into hair wisps. Then we can duplicate our curves. Curve wisps. Sorry, I'm not trying to make that sound, but it's just how it's going. And then with our wisp curve, we can grab the correct chunk there. We could just get rid of duplicates if we wanted to. We could even take the geometry and turn down the amount of subdivisions we're seeing. Something like that or so. And then perhaps we'll give it some frizz. Make it a little wispy. Don't quite like how it looks a little gross, but I think there's a smooth one in here too. Yeah. There we go. So something like that. And then with our wisp, we can take that wisp geometry, duplicate it, move it out. Start looking for good places to add it. So we got these little loops here. Stick it right in there. Goes down and up. And we can just model. Isn't that wild? Isn't it Isn't it astounding that we could just use our skills as modelers in a 3D modeling program instead of becoming barbers? Anyway, I shouldn't rag on Blender default hair grooms too much. They have their uses, but I'm ready to upgrade. Okay, again, we have the ability to kind of control the factor. Now I'm just going to turn it down, but we could always make another vertex group and control this directly. The factor ones especially are best suited to vertex groups because vertex groups go from 0 to 1. Anything with values, I think you'll need to create a driver for that to work with your attribute. And we'll also go ahead and just add a mirror there. Okay. And again, you just keep going, splitting, cutting, adding more and more detail, layering and layering, and eventually I think you'll get exactly what you want.